Well, welcome to the podcast. And I'm taking a slight break from a typical rhythm to talk about an issue that continues to grow and develop in scope and a need for continued information. It's ever changing. But with the COVID pandemic and the shutdowns, there's been a rapid digitalization basically on all business fronts in how we use and store data, people working from home. And so, the internet is used for much of our business, our databases, our CRMs, our transactions. And so at the same time as we as businesses increase our use of computers and the internet to conduct business, attacks from hackers and those seeking to gain financially through ill means continues to increase. And so the term we keep talking about is cyber and cybersecurity. And from an insurance perspective, cyber liability insurance policies. You often see news stories about different cyber attacks. There has been a number of them in the business, in the news, in the media recently, and in recent months. For instance, the Colonial Pipeline, which had 5,500 miles of pipeline shut down by a ransomware attack. In essence, a ransomware attack is when hackers come in and take over a server, preventing them from being able to conduct business, and they hold it hostage essentially until that company or victim pays a ransom. And obviously, this was both gasoline and jet fuel, so this was a potential impact to the aviation community. Basically, in this particular situation, the insurance company paid the ransom, and it got the pipeline operating again. And I do believe that one of the federal agencies was able to potentially recover some of that. But anyway, without that insurance policy, they would have had to come up with a very large sum of money in order to try and get back their data, their ability to operate. Garmin suffered a cyberware attack here over the summer. It shut down several of their services and provided a disruption on the flight plan filing, some account syncing, database capabilities, and created a headache there for a day or two. And so they had obviously a response to address. And I don't have all the details on how that turned out, but a lot of these stories we hear about are larger corporations, but in fact, the majority of cyber attacks are happening to small and medium-sized businesses, right? A lot of these hackers believe that larger corporations have much larger IT and cybersecurity policies, and so they're going after smaller companies. And we are seeing more and more losses in this area. These type of losses include denial of service attacks, right? They assault computers with programs that can be triggered by an external computer user, like Trojan horses is a term you used, and take over the use of the computer and its data. Ransomware, we just talked about. Data breaches. We hacked in and got everybody's sensitive information, right? And so those type of attacks. The other one is, which may or may not be covered under cyber liability policy, is wire transfer fraud. People hacking emails to do reroute wire transfers. I've experienced this personally and known others and other organizations that have. So we'll talk a little bit about that here in this episode. I'll try to keep it short. This is a very complicated and growing matter, but it's something that we need to continue in all aspects of business to pay attention to, in aviation or otherwise. So what we try to do is, there's a kind of a two-pronged approach to addressing this. And part of this is your internal IT processes and procedures, which I'm not an expert in. Fortunately, there are, and it's something you should invest in. There are tools, technology-wise, and policies and procedures that can help you reduce your exposure. So in effect, a risk management program for your information technology infrastructure and internet security. But you have the potential for your first party losses, meaning directly to your business, kind of like a physical damage loss would be. So just the crisis management, depending on the number of customers you have, notifying all customers and having a response team for a data breach can be quite extensive. The cost to restore your data or recover it can be extensive. The ransoms you have to pay, consequential damages that may occur, extra expenses in order to continue operating again. If perhaps maybe even something happens to one of your key dependent businesses that you rely on, a cyber attack, there's some potential first party losses that you have exposures for that may need covered. And then, then the third party aspect, right? You've been sued for, not properly securing the data of your customers, the private data. Perhaps some identities have been compromised, and so there is some cost to restoring those, addressing the media, addressing regulatory fines, and so on and so forth. A couple others. Again, funds transfer fraud, I think, is a big one. Again, I personally experienced this. What hackers will do is they'll find an email somehow, they'll spoof it, kind of use a similar email address and make it look exactly the same. And they'll say, hey, please change your the wiring instructions I send you to wire to this other bank. And it looks convincing. And unfortunately, this is something that happens regularly. So, cyber liability policies that address these exposures, they vary greatly. This is a kind of a new frontier of insurance. And so some of these coverage could or could not be on there. That's one that I would certainly, if you do any wire transfers, give or receive, I would want to make sure that coverage was a part of my cyber liability policy. Computer fraud, so loss of money, securities, or properties from an unauthorized entry into the computer system, telecommunications fraud, hardware replacement. There's just a lot of different potential exposures and coverages. So I think the main takeaways here I want to communicate are, number one, the need to, regardless of the size of your business, if you're a small and medium-sized business, you need to step up probably this in reviewing your business. It's probably not your core competency. So you either need an IT person on staff, or if you're, a smaller business, you need to engage a third-party specialist who can help you in these areas. Most cyber liability company insurers want to see that their customers, in fact, many of them are using multi-factor authentication. So if any of you have logged into an email system or a social media page and you had to enter a text or go on to their app to approve from a different device, that's all multi-factor authentication. If you have people logging in remotely, that's a big deal. Many of them like to see password resets, and they like to see that you have a technology policy that addresses these issues. So again, this is where bringing in an expert who can help you with these are important. So we need to do the risk management on the front end to try to prevent it, and then we want to try to do our best to cover as many exposures as we can with a cyber liability policy. But folks, this applies to all size businesses, certainly large and small. It's already affected aviation. There are other companies, but obviously we see the news on the bigger companies, and it's now, and it's growing and it's evolving. So it's important to stay on top of this. That's why I wanted to make sure and kind of to hit pause on our regularly scheduled episodes and to bring this message to you about the importance of paying attention to the cybersecurity issues, the exposures, and then these risk management and insurance solutions to address them. Well, here's your aviation fun fact for today. On November 1st, 1926, the Air Commerce Act was passed into law by the United States Congress. This act was created at the urging of aviation industry leaders and President Calvin Coolidge. The act mandates for the first time in history, such key pieces of aviation safety, and regulation as pilot licenses, aircraft airworthiness certificates, airways, and investigation of accidents. This step would go on to increase safety and the growth of aviation moving forward from there. Obviously, this eventually morphed into the FAA, the Federal Aviation Association, and what we have today. But this was an important piece of legislation in the history of aviation, of aircraft flight, of insurance, and all the things this relates to. And then, the growth of aviation over the years due to its increasing safety and security. Well, that's your aviation fun fact for today. Until next time, keep your wheels up and your attitude high.
Thanks for listening to the Aviation Business Podcast. If you found this episode of value, please share with someone who could benefit from its content. You can stay up to date by subscribing in iTunes or your podcast player of choice. This episode is brought to you by Aeris Insurance Solutions. your flight plan for navigating the turbulence in aviation insurance. To find out more, go to aerisinsurance.com. That's AERIS insurance.com.